Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. And I suppose I could say Happy New Year again, even though this is our second episode, I think, into the new year. Um, what we're going to talk about today is what we have going on for 2026, for lack of a better phrase. And we've got some exciting news. I think we'll expand on it a little bit, but first thing probably is that we're going to do a series of three episodes. This one and the upcoming next two, next week and the week after. And today we're going to talk about our framework, our flywheel, in some detail, because we've learned a lot about using that over the last few years. And we're also rebuilding our website. We've hired an agent we're excited about working with, and we're working pretty aggressively with AI on all kinds of different fronts. And Jim likes to call AI amplified intelligence, which I kind of like as well. But yeah, and so we're going to offer our services, consulting services, to anyone who might be interested in a little while, coming soon kind of thing. We're wrapping that whole thing up right now. And Jim's going to be offering his services as an individual, and I'll be offering mine. And we complement each other, but we also have different experiential backgrounds, so we can help different people in different ways. And although we do kind of message to men, this stuff is good for humans. So, young, old, male, female, no cultural distinction, nothing, no religious distinction. It's good. I suppose you have to speak English because that's the only language we speak, but that's a pretty sizable population. So we're going to walk around the five areas in the wheel and the center of the wheel and kind of put some context around the new things that are upcoming that we're excited about, and just kind of refreshing things because, like I said earlier, we've learned a lot over the last few years. Jim, let me throw it over to you.
Yeah, so Happy New Year to you again, Mark. I think something you mentioned was the word agent, and I remember, this is years ago now, talking about the importance of an agent, and now that term AI agent is used every day in a negative way, but I think we both would agree that agents are probably more important than ever before, and that's the human touch, the final fit and finish, the last mile. Humans will become a super important part of that. And as you know, I'm a innovator. I'm a tool maker, so I've made tools all my life for different things. And I think that AI is going to be one of the greatest human tools we could ever imagine, if used in the right way. But yeah, going back to the I guess the series that we're going to do, it all starts with this framework that we started a few years ago. We'll go through that, but I also always would like to mention the name of the podcast and what we call it. It's the Imperfect Men's Club podcast because when the inception of this was Mark and I talking about some conversations with each other and thought, hey, this would probably be pretty useful for other men. And so the reason we use the word men is because it's like a lot of things that I played rugby, as you know that. So a rugby club is a group of people that have common interest and common likes. It doesn't mean that this framework doesn't apply to every human. In fact, probably universally, it applies more than ever before. However, since we're at this stage in our lives where we have perspective, we have life lived experiences, we have children, we've um, wives, we've had all those different things. I think we can share some wisdoms that maybe a 30-year-old couldn't. That's
Yeah, some of this stuff that comes in handy, you just got to learn by doing. But in
yeah,
my in my in my life, I've always tried, as I'm sure we all have, is to learn as much as I can from the mistakes of others, so I don't make them myself. But sometimes you just got to fall on your own face and get back up, and that's the spirit of what we do. Get back up,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah, which is why we came up with the tagline, the imperfection is the perfection.
Hmm.
Because so it's the Imperfect Men's Club podcast where we talk about life, well, our life lived experiences, and just about a lot of different things in these five areas of our life. But we're really going to go all in on the framework, and we've got a couple different ways to describe it. It's a framework. Also refer to it as a flywheel and the wheel of life. So We interchange those terms, but at the end of the day, it's a framework
Hmm.
that probably more important than ever before because there's so much information out there. Without a framework, uh, things get really what's the AY word? Hallucination,
Yeah.
hallucination. So
That's
we
it.
all have hallucinatory. That's an episode for a relationship with women, but
Yeah. Well, I've
but men have
referred.
hallucination too. So
Yeah, yeah. I refer to it as a container. I've referred to it as a structure.
yeah,
Those words they're all there's like to your point, Jim. There's so much noise in the world. If you don't contain it, like what are the categories we can put all this stuff in? And we made these
hmm
selections. I could say they were random, but they really weren't. They really were a result of our lived experiences. And then as we
yep,
exchanged conversation over and over, this just kind of became organically. It felt right, and we've been
yeah,
complimented on it quite a bit, and we also have seen that it comes in handy in pretty much any conversation of substance that you
yeah.
want to have with anybody, you know?
Anybody, yeah. So just a visual, and again, this is the other thing we're going to do in 2024. As Mark mentioned, we're going to update our website. We're also going to improve our graphics. We're just going to have a more robust examples, and then for the first time, offer our agency services for those that we think we can help because everybody needs help. Everybody needs a coach. Mark referred to it as consulting, many different terms, right? What they call it, consulting, coaching. What those are to go to the next level, to live your best self. It's You can't do it alone. You need a good coach, or you need advisors. So this is it's something I think we're both passionate about. We use this framework every day in our lives, and so here's how it starts off. But as a visual, just think of it as a circle. It was inspired by at the time when Mark and I were doing this on a whiteboard, and as most of you know, I'm dyslexic. So what that means, that's sounds kind of cool or weird, whatever it is. But the reality is my mind is processing about 1,200 images per minute. The average person processes about 400. So my I'm thinking a lot, big picture concepts. Really good for innovation and seeing connecting the big picture dots, but real difficult for reading and writing. The reason I say that is I developed this way of thinking. It's called radiant thinking, where everything starts in the center and then it radiates out information. And so this was inspired by radiant thinking. So the center of that and is and I remember you, Mark, like it was like you used your hand. You put your hand in the front of the screen. You go like this, and you had 5 fingers, which
Hmm.
5 is my new favorite number because I can keep up with 5 things. I have fingers to cross reference them. But you held your hand up like this, and you point in the middle, and it's true. In the middle is our self,
Yeah.
and there's these 5 areas of your life. We'll go through what each one of those are. But in the self, we start off with self awareness because that's probably the most difficult for most men. This is specific to men. I think women, who knows? I don't want to speak for women, but I think particularly as we get older, men become less self aware. And that's often because they're not interacting or they're just not thinking about those things, right? They're either focused on their careers or who knows. But so we start off with there, and there's many selves. In fact, I think I had at one point a library of 40 selves. But if I was to start with one, it would be self awareness that these things are going on in your life, whether you're aware of it or not. And like everything, they get out of balance. Um,
Hmm.
so, and then, and number two, Mark, I'm going to add this for 2026 is self identity
Hmm.
because that's something at any age. Um, we're always self identity. There's self identity and there's self ideation, but believe it or not, they're two different meanings
Hmm.
because we are always evolving. If we're not, that's probably a problem at any stage in your life. We're evolving, and you could even say that's become our personal brand, which right now is probably the most important thing that you have is your personal brand. And we have
Yeah.
this amazing technology where we can actually push that out in a way
Yeah.
that really is our authentic selves.
I
But
think, and I
yeah,
think, Jim, to finish up on the self before we move into the areas, I think, yeah, you've got that library, which we'll probably make available because we're building a lot more content to make it available to people to get to understand more about
yep.
who we are and what we might be able to help with. But
Mhm.
I think, when I, in my career, and I won't go into detail because that's another episode, but is self-awareness is part of the beginning of my consulting with people, my coaching with people, whether I'm
Mhm.
trying to find them a job or not. It's like, tell me what's going on. And then it becomes a self reflection. Then it becomes,
Mhm.
let's go deep. So the self is really, like you say, the middle of your palm. And then these 5 areas of life are the way that we frame the categories of information that we can talk about and the categories of information that we think we can help people with. So do you want to start with any one in particular?
Yeah, let's decide together because this, I always say it in any particular order and it doesn't matter, but it does matter. In fact, I was playing around. I was had somebody over the house the other day and he asked about what I was doing. I said, "Oh, I just finished my podcast and he didn't know so I was explaining to him the wheel of life. And I have, you see one of these?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know what they call them, but it explains that where yeah, in these 5 areas, if you put too much focus in one area, then the other areas, that it's like a flying saucer, right? Or everything goes in that direction. The other stuff becomes less important. Um, but it also you can think of it as a wheel, and you spin it, and wherever that lands, you could start there and just do the other 5 after that.
Yep.
I think we often start with profession because as a man, our self identity is based on our careers, our profession. We so let's start off with that one,
Okay.
and then I'll describe it. And then we can decide which is next. I think I have an idea which one uh, in order seems to work the best. But profession is again our careers, really our identity as a man, our contribution of our life's work, and that may change, but for most of us, particularly in your 50, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, that's going to probably be established. And like I said, Mark and I are going to do separate episodes on ourselves, so we'll go more of a deep dive in our individual professions. But we did create 2 subcategories, and this was very thoughtful because a profession for an entrepreneur is very different than a profession for an employee.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start off with an employee. And we created 2 subcategories from that. One being corporate America. That's a very different life than being an entrepreneur. And then also government. And that could be a police officer, a fireman, a school teacher, really important jobs. It happened to be what my father did. So I grew up with the childhood of a Monday through Friday, weekends off, holidays off. That's very different than say corporate America where you're traveling and there's a lot of different situations. So,
Yep.
but yeah, let's and then the second one was entrepreneur, and that could also be in the category of freelancer, um, owner operator. Entrepreneur is a business owner, obviously, typically a smaller business, but it
Mm-hmm.
could be many different things. And so, yeah, let's kind of break that down, Mark, and give me your thoughts about. Well, you actually speak, well to this because of what you did in your career and career placement. So I'll
Yeah.
let you kind of run with that one as far as being uh, your profession and being an employee for a company for the greater parts of your life.
Yeah, it's well, again, I want to be cautious not to get into too much detail because we got to get around the wheel, and we want to separate these episodes out. We'll go much deeper when we're talking about me.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think that the world is a lot more entrepreneurs than it used to have, and
yeah.
for a lot of different reasons. And remote work and COVID and now AI. There's a lot of moving parts
Hmm.
that impact these things. But I would say that I've been living in these 4 distinctions for quite some time, and they
Hmm.
are definitely distinct. I mean, working
Hmm.
for a corporation is very different than working for the government,
Yeah.
and working for as the owner of a formal, structured, process-driven company is very different than freelancing, right? And
Yep.
so
Yeah.
there's nuance in all of those categories. But yeah, and just to finish out on this one, We do, as men, we do lose our identity inside of what we do for a living. And that can run into issues when what we do for a living no longer becomes what we want to do
Hmm.
for a living, or it gets interrupted, or we retire.
Hmm.
All of those things. Okay,
Yeah.
what do I do now? And
Yeah.
that's a big question for a lot of the people that we might be able to help out there, because it's been a question for both of us.
Yeah. Yeah. No question. Again, in respect to time, I do want to touch on this because just last week, uh, a very, very good friend owns a very successful construction company, and somebody else that worked in corporate America. Again, I'm trying to preserve their privacy, but both reached out to me about AI and also about some business ideas. Like I said, Mark, this is the most exciting time to ever be alive if you have something to offer to the world. Even if you had a 30-year career and he had, a master's degree, he had in-depth experience in his field, and he has this business idea. Could there be a better time than ever before to start a business with these AI tools? It's just
No,
remarkable.
no
And
question. The only
yeah.
conflicting factor is there's so much information and noise.
Well,
It's
yeah,
both. It's both.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I think it's going to be a common theme, and that's the importance of an agent,
Hmm.
but pick the right agent, right? And that has
Yeah,
many different terms. So
quiet, help them, help you quiet your noise and organize your thoughts, in a very
absolutely, yeah,
general sense.
and hold you accountable like all
Yeah,
good coaches do.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Which one do you want to go next?
next one I'm going to pick this time because again I've had it sometimes is worldview. This is a big one, man. I mean, you could say that about everyone, and it's funny because if you get in the right mood, maybe even a couple drinks, you can have a lot of fun with this because
Yeah,
everybody says, "Oh, this is the most important one," and it's it's very individual, but you've got something going when they saying this is the most important one, or the most relevant in their life at that moment. But I'll start off with we picked the word worldview because it best describes your perspective or your relationship with the world. And a lot of this is relationship based. At the end of the day, it's about alignment and connectivity. So it's an alignment with your authentic self, yourself, with your profession, but also alignment in the relationship that you have with the world. And we created two subcategories of that. And this is very strategic, right, Mark? And this gets better and better. But number one is a worldview, especially again, 40s, 50s, 60s, is based on politics.
hmm
And then from politics, we created two subcategories. Politics being, I refer to it as the red team and the blue team.
hmm
And we intentionally don't use the word because the word are triggers.
hmm
And this is kind of sad, but it's become a reality. Just by being on one team, you automatically are disliked by the other team. And so that's why we don't want to use trigger words. But of course, we know who the red team is. And we know who the blue team is. I'd like to
Well,
think I'm purple, but
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, it
The other thing that I want to mention in regard to that is that I think that it can be divisive, but it doesn't have to be.
doesn't have to be.
It
No.
doesn't have to be. And we do, even though we're not throwing trigger words in people's faces, we are prideful of the fact that we're candid and we're transparent, and
Yeah.
so we don't suffer fools, so to speak, and we don't. I personally, anyway, I won't speak for you. I'm not terribly interested in if I offend anybody, because if I offend you by being my authentic self, then you're not one of my people, and I'm not one of yours, and that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. But at this, the unfortunate reality is we're in a very contentious environment when it comes to politics. It's sad. I really like to try to start off if I can for the right person. If somebody is on the opposite team, is I really want to learn their perspective so I could possibly even update or modify my own.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
instead of trying to argue my point or convince somebody of something that they'll never believe if they have that much conviction for their team. It's kind of sad. That's the mascot, right? That's
Yeah.
the fanatic of being on the team. So yeah, so we politics and it's also your news channels, right? If you're
Yeah.
if you're a Fox News guy, you're on the red team. There's no doubt, right? If you're a I don't know what's the other one, CNN, you're
Yeah.
probably on the blue team.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the other place, as you know, just to transition, is the our worldview begins when we're kids, right? So,
Yeah, that's the second one.
where
Yeah.
you grow up, how you grow up, what your parents were all
Mhm.
about, your spirituality, where you came, your heritage, where you
Yeah, the
came
second one
from.
is childhood. So
Childhood is
again,
the second
yeah, this
spoke of the worldview. Yeah. And so
yeah, it's
that's,
a, it yeah, and
and
so let's talk about we spent a lot of time in this too because to your point, Mark, the childhood was the one where you start to develop your experiences and your worldview based on the time, the year, right? Very different if you grew up in the 70s versus the 80s or the 90s or whatever it is. The place,
hmm
that has a lot to do with your neighborhood.
yep.
And then we created two categories of that, which was we refer to it as your heritage. Um, Mark's Catholic Italian, or excuse me, Mark's Irish Italian.
Mhm. Irish Catholic.
I'm
You'll get it
thank
eventually.
you. That's my dyslexic popping out. I know I'd get it the first, but my point is, yeah, and I'm a lot of different things, but I would say probably more Italian, Catholic Italian, even though I'll let Mark speak for himself as far as spirituality, which I've really learned to value because a Catholic that practices is different than one that was raised that way and not. So, but
Yep.
these really play out, and this applies to it could be Hindu, it could be Buddhist, it could be, but yeah, you can find out a lot about a person by their where they grew up and when they grew up, and
Mhm.
how they view the world. So, yeah, anything to add to that one, Mark?
No, I think let's go to number three.
Yeah. So number three, it's also something somewhat, they're all connected, they're all related, right?
Mhm.
So we're going to talk about number three is the relationship with others, which is people,
Mhm.
and we created two categories because there's two people, whether some argue that or not, especially this day and age, right? There's a man and a woman, and
Yes.
but
Yeah,
and
and
some,
I think we talk about this a lot. Some of this stuff we talk about in private, and some we put in the public domain. But I think it's a reasonable statement to make that men and women are just different. Okay, and
yes,
so,
yeah,
and I would like to be leading the movement that gets us back to how we celebrate those differences
absolutely,
instead of
yeah,
dividing us with these differences. It's like I know a lot of women just like you do. I've had a mother, I had grandmothers, I had sister,
yeah,
I have daughters. I have a decent sample, and they think differently. They're better
yeah,
at certain things than we are, and they're not
absolutely,
as good at certain things as we are. And that's there's
yeah,
nothing wrong with that. I think
no.
if we were celebrating that like we used to, instead of diminishing it, we'd be better for it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the other important part of that is the masculinity and femininity. It's not a competition.
No.
We really need that and learn to appreciate one another. But yeah, the reason that we create those is because it does start, it's somewhat very related to our childhood, and it starts with our mothers because the relationship with our mothers is going to be different with the relationship with our fathers. And
You've told me stories about both on the podcast and
yeah,
outside the podcast. And if you start a story about your mom, and you start another story about your dad, they take two completely separate journeys. I mean, they're
hmm,
very, very different.
yeah.
Just to kind of add to that.
Yeah, it's and it's going to be fun when we do our individual ones because we'll go deeper into this. But yeah,
Mhm.
you bet the fact that your mother or father were um, Irish Catholics, and it goes way back as part of who we are. That's our DNA, right?
Mhm.
And the same with me. That's part of who we are.
Yep.
Whatever your heritage is, whatever your religion is, so it does connect. But that relationship with our mothers is really something that is always going on right until even when they're no longer here, and then it's a different relationship after that.
hmm
And then so for the women we have too, we have of course your family. That would be your mother, your sister, aunt, grandmother, all those, and then it's the girlfriends, uh, wives, significant others, all those things. That really plays out, and
hmm
these other things going on in your life, whether you realize it or not, are always playing out. And this, you're either projecting that on them or you're interpreting everything through the lens of your worldview. So
hmm
again, they cross over a lot, and they eventually start to really connect. Um, and then yeah, the father role is huge because that's often, we talked about this quite a bit on other episodes. Um, Men raise their children with their backs, meaning that it's what they see you do, not what you say what you're going to do.
Mhm.
And that's you can see how that plays out later on in their life because they trust that their father will be there, or if he wasn't there, then that's going to be some insecurity issues. So we talk about that, and then even more importantly, your friends, your surroundings, your environment. When you're your childhood, those friends that you hang on with, some will come and go, and then even friends that you meet later on in life. But
Yeah, and they say you are the product of the five people you spend the most time with. So
yeah,
picking the right friends is a big deal.
yeah.
All right, yeah, that's the people side. So we
Okay,
got we
all
got
right.
two more.
Two more. I'm going to talk about well-being, which is health, and we broke up this into two categories as well. I'll go with the first one, and that is our physical health. And our physical health is just, well, it's related to our episode last week, right? We talked about self-discipline. It's what you do with your body every single day. It's your breathing, it's your nutrition, it's your water intake, it's your exercise. That's your physical health. It's
Yeah,
it's every day.
I think what's been helpful with that one is we both have a level of interest in that topic.
Yeah.
We both have different practices. We
Hmm.
are both athletes,
Yep.
and we place a tremendous value on that. And I for one can say, when my physical game is on, I'm better at everything.
Yeah.
And when my physical game is off, my focus is not as good, my energy's not as good. I don't get the
Hmm.
same things done. When my health is on, I can get 8 hours of work done in four,
Yep.
and I
Yeah.
think all of us are like that to some degree.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And now we'll move on to the second subcategory of our health and well-being. That's our mental health,
mhm.
and probably more important than ever before for a lot of reasons. One, like you were saying, I know you do meditation, but um, just the mind and alignment and connectivity, getting that mind calibrated in the every day, so it's not wandering off on all these different places is something. And it's sad, but there's such a large population of Americans that have some form of depression, and particularly with men. It's one of the other things that inspired this um, podcast was the amount of men that are committing suicide around
It's
the age of
astounding. It's
60. And
astounding, and I
it's,
think
yeah,
that the world is a really noisy place, and we have
yeah,
too many online playgrounds to play on, and there's
yeah,
a lack of connectivity. COVID didn't help. AI is a challenge in regard to that,
yeah,
so both good and bad. But I think it's another reason that I do what I do and do what
mhm,
we do
mhm,
is I want to speak to that in a little bit of detail because I'm
mhm,
writing a book about that and
mhm,
in some capacity, and I think men in particular are lost
mhm.
and they're not trained. It's not in your DNA if you're a man to talk about these kinds of things, particularly in public. But I think we need to, and I think that we're going to talk a lot about that. And
Mhm.
I think a lot of what I've done with men and women over time professionally, it starts with that. Where's your head at,
Yeah,
man? Where's your head
yeah,
at? And it goes way deeper than that. But yeah,
mhm,
that's a
yeah.
topic that's near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, and if I can add to, like you said, you'll get more into yours, but also how we met was through this. So this is an area that you really have some expertise in, and
Mhm.
this is a few years ago, but I was struggling. I admit that it was a difficult time that I was going through, and but like I said, we'll get more into it. But there are things you can do, and
Yeah,
drugs
there's
isn't
yeah,
the traditional way is to medicate somebody to the point where they just are not themselves, and that's sad too because
it is. It's a big
yeah,
problem for a lot of men I know, and I've been
hmm,
fortunate to have avoided that up to this point. But I think it's in part because I have a consciousness about this that maybe is a little unique. I think both of
yeah,
us know a good bit about that. Both of us have a very strong intellectual curiosity, I would say, in these
yeah.
areas. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, absolutely. And then I refer to as self-medicating, which is addiction of all kinds of things, right? Whether that be alcohol, drugs, porn. I think
Yeah,
addiction is
people are addicted. People are addicted to exercise. Some of people are addicted to food. I mean,
absolutely, yeah.
it's not limited to, it's classically drugs and alcohol, but it's way more than that, you know?
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
so let's
and
round it
that's what
out.
it gets good. Really, that embraces the Imperfect Men's Club. It's a club where we talk about these things, and
All of them.
that's what a
Yeah.
club is. Instead of going to the local bar and talk about them, we talk about them with a little more structure and
Well,
perspective. Yeah.
and I think it's probably a good thing to say because I believe this. Not that we can bring all the answers to everybody because we can't.
Hmm.
No one can. But we also are interested in our worldviews evolving as
Hmm.
well. And
Yeah.
everybody that we meet that's new has the ability to bring something to us that we didn't understand or know about before that. And
Hmm.
I love that concept. And I think both of us are,
Yeah.
for guys that like to talk, I think we're both pretty good listeners too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 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 But and so the last one, which is one I always say we threw it in at the end because it
Yeah.
was a last minute, and then probably the most important one, right? You can say this about
It's
everyone.
become a lot more important. Yeah, it
Yeah,
definitely
I
has.
actually think, depending on where you're at in life, but it also connects with all the other four because, and it's money, it's finances.
Hmm.
We have a relationship with money, and that relationship, we created two subcategories. One of the subcategories is scarcity. So when our relationship with money it usually falls in it's either scarcity, and that has a lot to do with your worldview and your childhood. That's could have a lot to do with your profession, your mental health. It's all connected. The
Yep.
relationship
Yep.
with others, but and then there's and scarcity is one of two ways the mind will go. It'll go into fear mode, or to go into or pessimistic, meaning that you're afraid you're not going to have enough. You're fearful that there's not going to be enough. And again, everybody is different, and anybody that says they don't have a relationship with money is not very self-aware. This is
Yeah.
going on whether you're aware of it or not.
Hmm.
And then the second one, category of money was abundance, because
Hmm.
as an entrepreneur, you have to have some abundance because you're taking risk that if you do this, then you'll be compensated for it, but it's no guarantee. So, I do think you have to have more of an abundance mentality. And then within abundance, either have optimism um, and charity, charity that you,
Well, no, yeah. Yeah, it makes me think of mental health when you talk about abundance and scarcity, right? It's
mhm,
like that's a mind game that we play with ourselves, you know?
mhm,
But yeah, no, I think that these are all connected, as you said a few times. They're all very interesting. They all are fraught with interesting stories that we share from our childhoods
mhm,
all the way through fatherhood and professional evolution and all that. And I think that the last thing I'll say about money is I think my experience with it's been a roller coaster because I've
mhm,
made a ton of it and I've lost a ton of it. And I've been in both of those places. And I think that when guys have come to me in the past, this one kind of it's not talked about a lot, but
mhm,
it's very loud internally. It's very loud.
mhm.
It changes our behavior. It's a big
Yeah,
deal.
something I want to touch on too, and I think we're both more aware of it. And then having these conversations, I refer to them as columns or increments of stages of our life, because money and everything we're talking about when you're 20 is going to be very different than when you're 30. And that is going to be very different when you're 40 versus 50 and then 60, because particularly when it comes to money, your let's just say income opportunities or abilities may vary in those will vary in those time
Hmm.
periods.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
do know people say, money. Oh, yeah, of course, money is important. There's no question about it. But I think like everything, it has a cost. And if you're, and this is why I like this framework, because if you spent the majority of your life on your profession and you let all the other things go, that's your health, mental health, your physical health, your relationship with the world, your relationship with others, just for the money, you're going to have an out of balance life when you get older. And
It
that's just a
is.
reality. So everything has a cost, and it's just
Yep.
being self-aware that different stage of these lives. You may have to go back and get some things fixed in order to finish out to live your best self in your final
Yeah,
years, whatever those
no, that's
years
a
are.
great point, and I think that we can close out with that, and I'd just say that's an awful lot of self-awareness there. But yeah, we're really looking forward to this year. I think the some of the things I'd like to remind people of are we have a newsletter on LinkedIn. We have
Mhm,
almost we're getting close to 1,000 subscribers, but I don't know that all those people that read the newsletter listen to the podcast. So I'd love to see some cross pollination there. I'd
mhm,
love everyone that subscribes to listen to the podcast and everyone that
mhm,
listens to the podcast to read the
mhm,
newsletter because it's a different way of consuming information and sometimes it's a slightly different type of information. So,
mhm,
and then I always want to remind people to, get over on Apple and give us a review. We're accumulating them a little more slowly than I would like, but thank you for everyone that's done it. And for anybody who's inclined, please do it. And
mhm.
then, like we said at the beginning, and Jim, you can end on whatever note you want with if I missed something. But the website's exciting. Our agent that we hired is a great guy. We really like working with him, and I think we're going to be able to deliver a lot more to our audience, or those in our audience that are going to choose these services that we're going to provide. And I guess since we don't have deadlines, we're coming soon, kind of an announcement.
Mhm.
And so keep looking, keep listening. Stuff's going to just start showing up.
Yeah, yeah. The only, like I said, to add to it is with the new website, it will have maybe an email address you can opt in. I think we're going to start building out our YouTube page better. So yeah, a lot of exciting things to come in 2026. But yeah, Mark, look forward to next week episode. What are we going to talk about next week?
It's going to be either you or me.
And we're going to run us through this
Yeah, I'm
these
going to
five
run
areas of our life. So
our
it'll be great.
lives through the wheel because
Yeah,
this stuff's not just for you guys, it's for us too, you know?
absolutely. Yeah.
All
So
right,
all
Jim.
right.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.